Hey, Christmas is my wife's favorite time of the year. Absolute favorite. She begins listening to Christmas music somewhere around Halloween. She was disappointed that 96.5 didn't begin its Christmas set list as early as normal this year. She absolutely loves the Hallmark Channel. And I love making fun of all the movies on the Hallmark Channel because they all have the absolute same plot. It's amazing to me. She loves time, activities, adventures, get-togethers with family and friends. Or for her, Christmas is like the pinnacle when it comes to joy, excitement, family, fun, celebration, happiness. But then there are others, even some who might be in this room, and Christmas for you is difficult. It's challenging. It tends to aggravate problems you already have with issues like stress, anxiety, depression, the list goes on. And there are a variety of reasons. Lots of studies have been done as to why. For some, not all, years ago, the statistics were very much misread. But for some, there are all kinds of theories as to why Christmas aggravates stress, anxiety, depression. Some doctors, experts say it's the limited amount of sunlight, increased amount of rains, the darkness that is pervasive around this time of year that deepens sometimes depression. Some say it's feelings of loneliness that get exacerbated by this time of year. Can I just give a point of teaching? When you've got a great relational world, when things are hitting on all cylinders in your relational world, this time of year can be really, really good and fun for you. And then there are others. This year has been, or the last several months, have been a really dark period for them. For some, it's a death that occurs. For others, it's a divorce. And there's a loneliness that just intensifies at this time of the year. That's why when we do connect time, I hope you will never see that as a throwaway. I want to say to you, some of the most important time we spend is when we intentionally walk across an aisle, get to somebody we don't know, shake their hand, if appropriate, hug their neck. I say if appropriate. If you're a single dude looking to pick up that single girl, you might want to lay off the hug at that period of time. Give her some space. But it's important that we extend love during these periods of time. Because loneliness at this time of the year does tend to get exacerbated. Sometimes it's because somebody's missing who has been around the table in years past. Again, it may be a death. It may be a divorce. It may be desertion. It may be any number of things. Sometimes it's just the fact that during this period of year, anybody find that the demands on your life, they just increase? I'm talking about time demands, money demands, they increase, and yet the amount of time you have, it doesn't increase. The amount of money you have, it doesn't increase, and yet you've got to meet all these increasing demands. So this period of the year can create a lot of stress and anxiety, a lot of depression for a lot of people. In the middle of that, we begin a series called Extravagant. Now, here's what the word means. And if you've not looked at your notes yet, take them out of your program, because here's what that word extravagant means. It means excessive, exceeding the limits of reason, irregular, while not within ordinary limits, spending much more than is necessary, extremely or unreasonably high in price. When we met months ago to think about this time of year, that is the word that God brought to mind. Because I think that word is a great description of God, of God's love, of God's grace, of God's faithfulness. It is extravagant. It exceeds the limits of reason. It is irregular, wild, and not within ordinary limits. It spends way more than is necessary. It's willing to pay an extremely or unreasonably high price. That is the love, the grace, the mercy, and the faithfulness of our awesome God. So check out that big idea in your notes. It's what I want to unpack for a few moments. God is extravagant. Let's just say that out loud and together. God is extravagant. Let's say the rest of it. His extravagant love, astonishing faithfulness, and absolute sovereignty is bigger than my circumstances, past, personal attacks by difficult people, and private fears. Now that big idea flows right out of Psalm 57 that Montique was so eloquently read. Let's walk through that psalm for just a few moments. Did you notice there's an introduction to this psalm? And the introduction wasn't added by the translators. It's there in the original. And the writer tells us this is for the worship leader. It's a psalm, a prayer, a song of David. He describes the tune, do not destroy. Anybody else think that sounds like a heavy metal song to you? Do not destroy. And then he gives us this description. Written when he, David, hid from Saul in a cave. And a lot of scholars believe that that occurred between 1 Samuel 22:1, 1 Samuel 22:1 and 1 Samuel 24, verse 3. It's one of the most difficult periods of David's life. If you're experiencing a tough time, Psalm 57 is for you. Here's the background. I'll give it to you quickly. And the introduction may take a little time, but if you get the introduction, you'll get the psalm. First few years of David's life, everything's going up and to the right. I mean, he's on the fast track of success. A prophet shows up at his house, anoints him to be future king of Israel. Sometime later, he squares off against the champion of the arch enemies of Israel, a guy by the name of Goliath, and he takes Goliath down and out. He becomes a favorite musician in the court of King Saul. He becomes a war hero in Israel. This dude was a SEAL Team 6 caliber warrior who was so successful on the battlefield that the nation of Israel actually composed psalms about his heroism and valor. For several years in David's life, everything was going up and to the right until the bottom fell out. David was promoted from shepherd kid to court musician to warrior to most successful officer in Israel's army, until one day King Saul, first king of Israel, becomes insanely and pathologically jealous of David and orders a hit on his life. And David has to flee for his life. Now, this wasn't a temporary problem. You need to know this. David ends up having to run for 10 years. 10 years plus, he's hunted as a fugitive. The guy who had been promised the palace, the guy who had the world by the tail, the guy who was voted most likely to succeed in his high school and college class, the guy who had wealth, power, beauty, fame, friends, a six-figure income, security, and what he thought was a guaranteed future. And by the way, none of that was his idea. This guy was really comfortable sitting out on the backside of nowhere, taking care of his dad's sheep. The guy who was expecting, because of the prophecy of Samuel, the palace, ends up in a cave with no explanation as to why and no guarantee that he'd ever get out. This is mind-blowing. The best we can tell, David spent 10 years plus as a fugitive. For 10 years, from a human perspective, it looked like none of God's promises were ever going to pan out. None of God's promises were ever going to come true. And how many of you think that kind of period of time can be devastating? Those were tough years. Here's what I want to talk about for a few moments. I want to talk about what to do when you're in the cave. The cave. The cave. This is not in your notes, but you might want to jot it down. Here's what the cave is. It's where you find yourself when all of your props, crutches, scaffolding, all of the stuff that holds you up and holds you together gets stripped away. The cave is where you end up when you thought you were going to do something great. You had this incredible life plan. You had this incredible 10-year plan. You thought you were going to have the great family. And you end up with a divorce. You thought you were going to have amazing kids, and one of them ends up in addiction. You thought you had the awesome job, and it's stripped away. You thought you had a developing relationship, and it goes south. I don't want anybody to answer right now, but how many of you are in a cave right now? Maybe you lost a job. Maybe you're under financial pressure. For some of you, maybe it's the fact that dreams that you felt were coming to pass have suddenly come to a halt. For some of you, it's not the fact that you're in the middle of a divorce. You're still married, but there's such distance and disconnect between you and your spouse that it feels like a Grand Canyon between the two of you, and you wonder, will I ever find love again? For others of you, it's a medical diagnosis that has shaken you to the core. For others, it's a bad financial choice. We could go on and on. You can fill in the blanks regardless of where you are. Some of you are just like David. At this moment in your life, you find yourself in a cave. If you're there right now, I've got a word for you. And if you're not there right now, let me just say, you're going to experience a cave at some point in your life. And I've also got a word for you. And this is the word. Caves are where God does some of his best work. The cave is sometimes what God uses to shape, mold, develop faith and character into something that is firm, fierce, steady, and rock solid. You see, sometimes it's only when all of our props, crutches, scaffolding in life gets stripped away. Sometimes it's only when all of the awards, achievements, little pieces of paper get stripped away, and we discover God is all we have, that we also make this discovery. He's also all I need. He is enough. For the worship leader, a psalm of David to this tune, when he hid from Saul in a cave. Don't read over those words. These words were not written when everything was going right in David's life. They were written when everything was going wrong. Look this way. This is where some of us miss it, particularly those of us who struggle with depression, anxiety. Our conversations with ourselves do nothing to lessen the depression, stress, anxiety. They only increase it. See, when you're in the cave, you don't need to listen to Eric Clapton singing the blues. When you're in the cave, you don't need to have a conversation with yourself filled with self-pity, self-loathing. Words that amplify and magnify your condition. When you're in a cave, you need to take a lesson from David, who is real about his pain, real about his problems, real about everything that's going on around him, real about the fact that my life hasn't been this way for a day, a week, a month, or a year. I've been on the run for more than 10 years, but sitting in this cave all by myself, I know something about God. I know that his love is more extravagant than I can imagine. I know that his faithfulness is absolutely astonishing. I know that he has power that supersedes the power of the king who sits on the throne in Israel. Therefore, I will not speak words that exacerbate my depression. I will speak words that magnify the greatness of my God. And in this cave, I will worship, because worship is always a decision that I can make. I'm going to focus, David says, on the extravagant love of God. That's verse 10. God, your love is extravagant. Your faithfulness is astonishing. I'll focus on that. You see, David knows this, and he walks this out in the psalm. God's extravagant love means at least 4 things. Let's see how many of these we can talk about. It means, first bullet, God is for me. That the sovereign, large, and in charge God is on my side and wants what's best for my life. I just want you to wrap your head around that thought. God is for me. And this isn't an isolated idea pulled from a modern self-help book. I mean, this shows up all throughout Psalm 57. By the way, David also wrote Psalm 56, and most scholars say Psalm 56, 57 are very closely tied together. They even have themes that are really, really similar. And in Psalm 56, I think it's verse 9, David is so convinced that God is for him that he says something like this. And we don't have the verse on the screen or in your notes, but you might want to jot it down and look it up when you get home. David says something like this, Psalm 56, verse 9. My enemies will retreat when they hear your name, for I am convinced that God is on my side. That's David. God is for you. Now, what does it mean? Think about that. When we say God is for you, if someone loves you, they're for you. That means they have hopes, dreams, intentions for you. It means they're in your corner. Anybody seen the new Creed movie? Oh, yes. I knew you would say yes, Montiqua. I know you're a Michael B. Jordan fan. I mean, in that movie, when Adonis is struggling, he's got somebody in his corner. He's got somebody on the front row of that arena. And they're cheering him on even when things are bleakest. And you need to know, when we say God is for you, we mean this. God is in your corner. He's on your side. And it's something most of us don't get. God is for me. He's not against me. He's not ambivalent about me. He's not neutral, casual, apathetic, or indifferent when it comes to me. God is for me. Now, can you imagine this? I wish I had a chair up here. Can you rob that chair off the end of that? Yeah, it's hard to pull apart, but we will do it. Can you just, thank you, David. Thank you so much. We'll just get back in the cave. The A2 TV people will appreciate this because I just vanished, but the rapture has not taken place. Imagine this. David is sitting in a cave. I mean, read those 3 chapters, 1 Samuel 22 through 24. All kinds of events go down when he's in that cave. I mean, he's in that cave when the guy who's been chasing him for 10 plus years enters the cave to relieve himself. The Bible is that explicit. And evidently, It's the sort of relieving of yourself that takes some time, because a conversation takes place behind the scenes. David's men look at him and say, God has put your enemy into your hands. Kill him. David's in the cave. I can sing the blues. Now I can take matters into my own hands. Now I can kill the one who's made my life miserable for more than 10 years. I can get revenge. I can get even. What will I do? Oh, right here in this cave, where nobody's watching except a ragtag group of men, I will entrust my future into the hands of the ever-faithful God. Killing Saul will not give me the throne. I refuse to lay my hands on the Lord's anointed. I will not take this circumstance into my own hands. Instead, I will worship. I will speak to myself, wake up, soul. I will speak to myself, awaken the dawn with your song. Don't sit here singing the blues. You right now bust into worship. You right now square your shoulders back, fill your lungs with breath. Sing a song magnifying the greatness of God, because God is for you. He made that decision in the cave. How do I know this? Look at what he says in verse 1. Have mercy on me, O God. Have mercy. I'll look to you for protection. I'll hide beneath the shadow of your wings until the danger passes by. David knows prayer is a privilege, and therefore, when I'm experiencing these feelings, instead of venting horizontally, spewing emotional vomit on everyone around me, I will vent vertically and remember that I can glorify my awesome God. Prayer is a privilege. I'm laughing because I imagined this so differently this morning when I was thinking. I didn't imagine screaming like I am. On top of that, he reminds himself of God's power. Look at verse 2. I cry out. Can you say it out loud if you're reading your notes there at verse 2? I cry out to God Most High, to God who will fulfill his purpose for me. He will send help from heaven to rescue. Well, that is so loaded, so rich. Underline the expression God Most High. It's the Hebrew word Elohim Elyon. Elohim Elyon. Two Hebrew words for God combined. Elohim, get this. Here's what's on David's mind. This is how he talked to himself when he was in a cave. I will cry out to not Santa Claus, not a good man with good intentions, long beard, who's been around a long time and may or may not show up. I will call out to Elohim. And the word means creator God, the strong, all-powerful, mighty, and faithful one. That's my God. Elohim Elyon. And Elyon simply means Most High God. In other words, Saul isn't calling the shots. I know it looks like that temporarily, but there is a sovereign king who hasn't been voted in, who will never be voted out. And regardless of what goes down in my life, he is Most High God. So right here in this cave, I will cry out to Creator, strong, all-powerful, mighty, faithful God. I will call out to the God who is above and over all. Because God is for me. He even reminds himself that this God isn't limited by geography. Notice twice in this psalm, it's a Selah psalm. The word Selah appears, and I love the fact that the Passion translation gives us some insight into that word Selah. It simply means I'll pause in his presence. Now you need to know this. Some of us, We need to know this because we're in the new covenant. David was in the old covenant. Worship revolved around a specific place and a specific piece of furniture in that place, namely the Ark of the Covenant. In fact, that's what he's referring to when he talks about hiding in the shadow of his wings. It's not just a metaphor about the care that a mother bird gives her hens or chicks. This is a picture of David camping out under the Ark of the Covenant, under those wings of a cherubim that covered the Ark of the Covenant. But here he says, I've learned something hiding out in a cave. I've learned that the presence of God can't be restricted to a specific geographic location. I've learned that God's with me when I go to the temple in Jerusalem, but I've also learned that God is with me sitting in a cave surrounded by darkness, the enemy fleeing me. God is with me even here. That's a good place to say amen. I'll pause in his presence. He reminds himself God's love will not quit. My God will send forth his unfailing love and faithfulness. Verse 10, your love is so extravagant. What kind of conversations are you having with yourself in your cave? Because those conversations will take you out or lift you up. Those conversations will take you out or they will lift you up. I'll remind myself, David says, of the extravagance of my awesome God. God, Elohim, Elyon, is for me. When you read scripture and you hear David say, I will cry out to God Most High, who will fulfill his purpose for me. Don't just read that. I will cry out to God Most High. Elohim, Elyon. Here's what I think David is doing as he writes that. I'll cry out to the God who flung the galaxies into existence. The God who spoke, let there be, and there was light. The God who brought order, beauty, symmetry out of chaos, confusion, brokenness. I'll cry out to the God who can do immeasurably more than I can think, ask, request in my wildest dreams. I'll cry out to the God whose thoughts are higher than my thoughts, whose ways are higher than my ways. I'll cry out to the God whose love I can't possibly comprehend, whose mercy I will never possibly deserve, whose power I can't possibly control. I'll cry out to the God who exists outside the four dimensions of time and space. I'll cry out to the God who can make and break the laws of nature that he himself established. I'll cry out to the God of our history, the God who can make the sun stand still, who parted the Red Sea, who supernaturally provided food for 3 million people in the wilderness, who also answered prayer miraculously and sent quail, who also answered prayer and provided water from a rock. I will cry out to Most High God, Elohim, Elyon. I'll cry out to the God who was able to roll back the Jordan and bring down the walls of Jericho. I'll cry out to that God. And for you and me, here's what it means. We'll cry out to the God who turned water into wine, healed the son of a politician just by speaking the word, healed a blind man by spitting in dirt, making a mud pie, putting the mud pie on the eyes of the man and telling him to go take a bath. I'll call out to the God who walked on water, calmed the storm. I'll call out to the God who stopped the funeral procession of a young man, raised him again to life, returned him to his mother. I'll call out to the God who raised a guy by the name of Lazarus back to life, who had already been dead for 4 days and lost the possibility of a refund on the casket. I'll call out to God who took death on himself, was buried, but 3 days later raised again to life. I will call out to Elohim, Elyon, Most High God, the God who is above it all. I just came to say, if this is a tough time for you, God is for you. If you're weak, he'll carry you. If you're discouraged, ready to give up, go home, he'll breathe new life into you. If you're struggling with loneliness, he will be the friend who sticks closer than a brother. And I feel things really intensely. I know you can't tell that at all. I do. And there are days I leave here and I feel like, God, you accomplished your purpose in me and through me. And there are other days I leave here and I told two members of the team this week, I just want to take that Toyota Tundra and drive it into a brick wall at full speed. I feel this depth of failure that is almost unbearable. And I have learned I am responsible for this. The moment I take responsibility for everything going on in my life is the moment I can start to change anything going on in my life. As long as I blame you, blame whoever's in the Oval Office, blame the conditions in my city, is as long as I stay stuck. But the moment I say, I'll take responsibility, and in this cave, I will sing of your love forever. I will sing of your love forever. I will sing of your love forever. I will sing of your, come on, some of you know that. Yeah. I will sing of your love forever. 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 Change your conversation. Great is your faithfulness. Great is your faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, your hands have provided. Great is your faithfulness, Lord. But I'm so sad. But things are so bad. But my life just sucks. Okay, just keep saying that over and over. Or you can sing, great is your faithfulness. I'm getting up out of this chair. I'm getting up in the middle of this cave. Faithfulness, morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have did thy hand hath provided. Great is Lord. Anybody see what happens when you begin to focus on his faithfulness, his love, his grace, his goodness? Something changes in you. Let's give God about 15 seconds of crazy praise. Let's let it ring to God. Come on, 15 seconds of just crazy praise. Let it ring to God. Praise the Lord. Thank you. Come on, Jordan. So I've already preached everything in these points without giving you the points, but let me give you the points, okay? God's extravagant love for me means that God is for me. The sovereign, large, and in charge God is on my side too. It means God has a purpose for my life that's bigger than current circumstances. Saul chasing him 10 years. My past, personal attacks by a difficult person. Read the language in Psalm 57. It's obvious David is describing attacks on his character. Verbal attacks. I've got enemies They've got fierce teeth that pierce me. It hurts. He says God's purpose is bigger than that. It's bigger than my private fears. I love it. In one verse, he says, fear, this is how honest and real he was, but he didn't stay there. Fear has overwhelmed me. Yet, verse 2, I cry out to Elohim Elyon, God Most High, to God who will fulfill his purpose for me. Oh, I need to blog that out because that's good material. It's just staying on the cutting room floor. Third, God's extravagant love means that peace is possible regardless of where I am and what's going on. I love verse 7 where he says, my heart is confident in you. My heart is confident, oh God. No wonder I can sing your praise. David discovered something in that cave. He discovered peace isn't a byproduct of the absence of my problems. Peace is the reality of God's presence and power in the middle of my pain and problems. Fourth, God's extravagant love means this. Listen, this is critical. This is worth the whole shebang. God's extravagant love means this. I can worship. I can always worship. It's a decision. It's my response to the extravagant love and unchanging character of God. David discovered something in that cave when he burst into song that we call Psalm 57. And these are the last blanks in your notes. He discovered this. Worship doesn't change God, but it always changes me. I will sing of your love forever. 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 You know why I'm smiling? Because this song predates that man on the keyboard by 20 years. He's like, I've never heard it before. And I'm like, everybody knows it. I don't know if you do or not, Jordan, but it's just funny to me that I was singing that when you weren't even a spark in David and Missy's eyes. But we'll sing it again, right? We might write a new melody. How about it? I will sing of your love forever. I will sing of your love forever. You getting it now? I will sing of your love forever. I will sing of your love forever. Whew. That's my response to the cave. I will sing of God's extravagance. Now here's what I'm going to do the next 3 weeks. We're going to talk about how an extravagant God, when we get a picture of him, that it doesn't demand, because grace is not about demanding, it invites extravagant worship as a response. We stand in awe like David did of who God is. And we say, even in a cave, this situation will not dictate my response. I will worship. Highest act of worship is to surrender your life to Jesus. And I want to invite you to do that right now in a simple prayer. Just say these words out loud and together. Not alone. Faith family, say them with us. Heavenly Father, thank you for loving me extravagantly. Thank you for your faithfulness that is astonishing. Thank you for your power that will not stop. I choose to surrender my life to you, to Jesus. He is Lord of me.